11:47 a.m. March 4th, 2003. A Tuesday morning in central Antwerp, Belgium, the diamond capital of the world. Inside the Fortis Bank branch on De Keyserlei Street, 17 customers stand in line. A teller counts out bills. A security camera sweeps left, then right, then left again, on its 12-second rotation. The bulletproof glass between the tellers and the public is 38 millimeters thick, the same specification used in the motorcades of heads of state. Then a single crack splits the air outside. Not an explosion, not a car backfiring. One deliberate surgical shot fired from 340 meters away, the length of 3 football fields, punches through that glass like it was made of cellophane. In the next 4 minutes, 3 men will walk out of that bank with 2.1 million euros in cash and negotiable bonds. And here is the part that will genuinely disturb you. The sniper was never supposed to hurt anyone. The bullet was the key. And by the time investigators understood what had actually happened, the architect of this robbery had already crossed 2 international borders. This is the story of one of the most technically sophisticated bank robberies in European criminal history. A heist that combined military-grade ballistics, behavioral psychology, and a precise understanding of how panic rewires the human brain. By the end of this, you will understand exactly how it worked, why it almost failed, and why the man who designed it may still be walking free today. Let's start with a target. Fortis Bank, the Keyserlei branch, wasn't famous for its architecture. It was famous for what moved through it. Antwerp in 2003 processed roughly 80% of the world's rough diamond trade, an estimated $26 billion in annual transactions flowing through a handful of square kilometers. The banks servicing that trade weren't typical retail branches. They handled bearer bonds, unregistered cash transfers, and currency conversions that didn't generate the paper trail a normal wire transfer would. The branch on De Keyserlei was what insiders called a comfort bank, a place where diamond traders, many of whom operated on handshake agreements and didn't trust digital records, preferred to conduct business in person, in cash. On any given Tuesday morning, the vault behind a teller line could hold anywhere between 800,000 euros and 4 million euros, depending on which traders have come in the day before. The security profile was formidable. 2 armed guards, one stationed at the entrance and one roaming the floor. A dual-key vault system that required both a manager and a senior teller to open simultaneously. Motion sensors covering the back corridor. A silent alarm wired directly to the Antwerp Federal Police Dispatch Center, with a promised response time of under 6 minutes. And then, that glass. 38mm polycarbonate composite, rated to stop a .44 Magnum round at point-blank range. The kind of glass that made bank employees feel untouchable. That confidence, that specific architectural confidence, was exactly what the man planning this robbery was counting on. His name, according to 3 separate Europol intelligence reports filed between 2003 and 2007, was listed only as architect. His real identity remains officially unconfirmed, though Belgian investigators believe he was a former signals intelligence contractor who had worked for a NATO-adjacent private security firm in the late 1990s. Mid-40s, calm, methodical, the kind of man who, according to one investigator who requested anonymity, never once raised his voice in the entire surveillance footage we recovered. What we know about his background comes from fragments. a rental agreement in Ghent traced back to a shell company registered in Cyprus, a storage unit in Brussels that investigators found swept clean of forensic evidence, but still containing a single laminated diagram of the De Keyserlei branch floor plan, and a series of interviews with a low-level associate who later cooperated with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. According to that associate, the architect had been studying this specific branch for 14 months. Not weeks, 14 months. He had mapped every camera angle, timed every guard rotation, catalogued the names and shift schedules of every employee. He had sat in the cafe across the street so many times that the barista had started setting aside his usual order, a black coffee and a croissant, without being asked. He wasn't impulsive, he was obsessive. And the distinction matters because what he designed wasn't a smash and grab. It was a psychological experiment. Here is what he understood that most criminals don't. A bank robbery doesn't fail because of the vault. It fails because of time. Every second you spend inside is a second the response closes in. The guards, the alarms, the police, none of them are the real obstacle. Time is. So his entire plan was engineered around one question. How do you give yourself more time inside the bank without staying inside any longer? The answer he arrived at was brutal in its elegance. You don't extend the operation, you delay the response.
Unit 3 to control.
The mechanics
We
worked
have
like
contact.
this.
Need backup now.
At 11:43 a.m., 4 minutes before the shot, a member of the crew triggers a vehicle collision 2 blocks north on Pelikanstraat, a minor fender bender, staged, involving a rental van and a parked delivery truck.
One moment.
Nothing
I will
serious enough
cross-reference
for
the
police,
data now.
but serious enough to briefly occupy the radio bandwidth of the private security patrol contracted to cover 3 blocks of the Kaiserlei. 1 channel occupied. At 11:46 a.m., a woman, later identified by her gait on surrounding CCTV, but never formally charged, enters the bank branch directly and approaches the guard at the door, asking for directions in broken Dutch. She doesn't threaten him. She doesn't need to. She simply occupies his attention for approximately 45 seconds and then leaves. At 11:47 a.m., the sniper fires. The shot is not aimed at a person. It is aimed at the lower left corner of the bulletproof glass panel, specifically at the point where the frame meets the composite pane. At 340 meters, using a .338 Lapua Magnum round, traveling at approximately 930 meters per second, the impact doesn't shatter the glass, it cracks it. A spiderweb fracture that radiates outward from a single point, no larger than a fist. But here's the thing about 38mm polycarbonate when it cracks. It sounds, to everyone inside the building, exactly like a bomb going off. The guard at the entrance spins toward the glass. The tellers drop below their counters. 2 customers run for the exit. The branch manager, trained on an active shooter protocol that was written in 1998 and had never been updated, does exactly what the architect predicted. He moves toward the back office to activate the primary alarm. And in doing so, he moves away from the vault. The 3 men enter through the side service door, a door that, because of a maintenance contract renegotiated 18 months earlier, is now on a mechanical lock rather than an electronic one. The architect had obtained the key code from a former cleaning staff member through a method investigators described only as social engineering of a non-violent nature. They are inside for 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
Move quickly to the
The
green
guard
exit.
at the
Do not
entrance
look back.
is still
Keep
processing
moving.
the glass. The branch manager is in the back office. The roaming guard has moved toward the panicked customers near the exit, because that is what his training told him to do. Protect the civilians first. The crew reaches the vault anteroom. They don't crack the vault. They don't need to. The morning delivery from the Central Fortis clearinghouse had arrived at 9:30 a.m. and had not yet been fully processed. The cash and bonds are still in the transit cart, sitting in the anteroom behind a standard cage lock, not the dual-key vault. €2,140,000. They take it in 3 duffel bags, move back through the service corridor, exit through a loading dock into an alley where a car is waiting with its engine running. The car is a 2001 Volvo V70, registered to a retired school teacher in Liège, who reported it stolen 4 days earlier. The silent alarm reaches Antwerp Federal Police Dispatch at 11:48 a.m., 1 minute after the shot. The first patrol unit arrives at 11:54 a.m. By that point, the Volvo has already been switched for a second vehicle, parked 600 meters away in a municipal garage. The second vehicle's plates are clean. The crew is gone. What comes next is where the story gets genuinely strange. Investigators initially assume the sniper is a distraction, a co-conspirator positioned to cover an escape or neutralize a guard if something went wrong. It takes 3 weeks for the lead investigator, a federal police analyst named Peter Vanderhagen, to realize the shot was not tactical in any traditional sense. It was theatrical. The bullet was designed to be heard, not to land. Vanderhagen's report, which leaked to a Belgian financial newspaper in 2005, described the operation as, quote, "the most deliberate exploitation of conditioned fear responses in any robbery we have investigated." The entire plan relied on a single behavioral assumption: that trained personnel, when confronted with an unexpected and overwhelming sensory event, will follow their scripted protocols, and those protocols would scatter them away from the asset. He was right about every person in that building, except one. A 23-year-old trainee teller named Elise Martin did not drop below her counter when the glass cracked. She stepped forward, looked directly at the spiderweb fracture, and then looked at the service door to her left, which she noticed was open when it should have been closed. She picked up the phone on her desk and called the direct line of the second security guard, not the main alarm, the direct line, and said in a completely steady voice, "They're in the anteroom." Her call reduced the crew's window by approximately 90 seconds. Had the transit cart been positioned 6 feet further back in the anteroom, they would not have had time to load everything. It is the one variable the architect had not accounted for: a person who didn't panic. 3 investigations were opened across Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. Interpol issued a red notice for the individual known as the architect in 2004. 14 people were questioned. 6 were briefly detained. 2 were charged with peripheral involvement. The woman who spoke to the entrance guard was eventually identified and received a suspended sentence. The driver of the first vehicle was arrested in Rotterdam in 2006 and served 4 years. The architect was never charged. The €2.1 million was never fully recovered. Belgian authorities seized approximately €340,000 from accounts linked to the Rotterdam arrest. The remainder, roughly €1.76 million, has never been officially located. As for the architect himself, 3 theories exist among the investigators who worked the case. The first is that he died sometime between 2005 and 2008, possibly in an unrelated criminal dispute in Eastern Europe, a theory supported by the complete cessation of any activity matching his operational signature after 2007. The second is that he retired, converted the money into untraceable assets, and is living a quiet, unremarkable life somewhere in Western Europe, indistinguishable from any retired professional of his age. The third comes from Peter van der Hagen, who worked the case for 6 years before transferring to a financial crimes unit. In an interview he gave to a Flemish true crime podcast in 2019, he said something that has stayed with everyone who heard it. He said, "The thing I could never stop thinking about was the 14 months of surveillance. 14 months of sitting across the street, learning every face, learning every habit. He knew the name of the manager's wife. He knew which teller stayed late on Fridays. He knew the brand of coffee in the break room." He paused. A man who plans something for 14 months isn't doing it only for money. He's doing it because he wants to prove it can be done. And the most unsettling part is that he did prove it. Van der Hagen closed his laptop and looked directly at the interviewer. And the only person who stopped him from getting everything was a 23-year-old who nobody had trained to be brave.
Follow the
She
protocols
just
precisely as outlined in Stage 1.
Elise Martin left banking in 2005. She now works as a crisis response consultant for a private firm, but advises financial institutions on staff behavior under duress. She has never publicly discussed the robbery. Her protocols, emphasizing direct human contact over automated systems during a security event, have since been adopted by 14 banking groups across the Benelux region. The sniper to this day has never been identified. The bullet that cracked the glass was recovered and analyzed. It matched no registered weapon. It matched no previously logged ballistic signature in any Europol database. It came from somewhere. It was fired by someone. And then, like the man who ordered the shot, it simply entered the record and disappeared. Somewhere, a 38mm fragment of polycarbonate composite sits in a Belgian evidence archive, catalogued under a case number that remains officially open. A single crack radiating outward from a point no larger than your fist. The question isn't whether the architect got away with it. He clearly did. The question is whether, wherever he is right now, he still thinks about the one thing he didn't plan for, and whether he considers it a failure or the most interesting part of the whole operation.